All right, and we are live. So today I have with me Dave Miller, and he is a professional coach. Is that what you would say?
Yeah,
Professional
that's
business
fine. Yeah.
coach,
Yeah.
and has been an actuary in the past, and has also authored a book for actuaries. So thank you for joining, Dave.
Hey, thanks for having me, Paul.
Definitely. So before we kind of dive on in, let's just start out with like kind of a couple sentence background about yourself, and then we'll kind of get going.
Sure. I guess career-wise, I started out as an actuary, as you said. I started working at an insurance company, life insurance company. Spent most of my time there on annuity product development
Okay.
and worked through the exams, got my FSA, and then later switched, got a new job in a consulting firm. And there it was actually a kind of a benefits consulting firm, and I had to build a practice consulting to life insurance companies there, which was great growth experience, and spent 7 years there, and then felt like really a big change coming on in my career, kind of a calling, if you will,
Yeah,
to do something that impacted people more directly. And that's how I got into the coaching, training, human development world, if you will.
that's awesome. And so the company that you started is called Business Growth and Strategies. Is that correct?
Business growth strategies. I
Yeah.
have a kind of a subset, like different website, but really it's still me, called Leadership Growth Strategies
Okay.
as well. So, um,
And
but the areas we work in are sales, leadership, influence, and change management.
that's awesome. And so you're like with this business, you'll have people come to you from all sectors of business for whether it's business coaching or life coaching or professional development, like that kind of a thing.
Yeah, I mean it's again. I think we were talking a little bit earlier about when I first got into it. I was like, I can coach you on anything. It was the
Yes.
process, but that's really hard to sell because people don't really get that. So like any business, you want to develop somewhat of a niche.
Mhm.
So I had known a lot of actuaries, obviously, from my career. I knew consulting, I knew selling. So a lot of the work I did was with consultants, with business owners, also leadership with organizations, working with their teams, with executives on those kind of things. But it all kind of surrounded around understanding what makes people tick,
Yes.
and knowing how to relate to people better and be more influential
And
and
you and I
changing
were
the
kind of
team.
talking a little bit beforehand, but it sounds like for you, uh, you said you felt like this was a calling, and you're more of a people person, and you felt like you weren't maybe quite getting that with your actuarial side, and so this kind of matched you a little bit better.
Yeah, it was over several years that I was kind of wrestling on and off with that whole
Yeah.
thing about my career direction. I enjoyed being an actuary. I liked what I did, liked the challenge of it. It's a great career.
Mhm.
I still do some actuarial work on the side as well, so I enjoy that. But I looked what I was doing outside of work versus what I was doing in the workplace, and it was quite different. I was working with people a lot more. I was doing more relational things. Pretty active in my church, so doing a lot of ministry. And I said, man, I'm wondering if I should do something that impacts people more directly. And I would say, even in consulting, I thought, well, that's going to, you're working with people all the time. Well,
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
really not.
Yep.
In consulting, you have a little bit of time to present results and deal with the client, but then you got to go back to your office and crank out the work. So,
I was actually curious about that when you mentioned the consulting side, how different that is from like a traditional role. Because in my head, I'm thinking that would be maybe more people interaction,
and
but
it can be, it depends really on the nature of the assignment. Like there was a project I was on where I was actually at the client's site just about every day. And of
okay,
course,
yeah,
there's more interaction there.
yep,
But typically, I think most consulting assignments, if I could generalize here, is really about dealing with the client, especially now, a lot of times virtually. You're not even meeting them face to face, and doing the work, cranking out the work, whatever it is, developing a product, reserving whatever it is,
Right.
and then presenting the results back to them. But not a lot of constant interaction, working day to day with people
Right. That makes
so
sense.
much. So that was my experience, and so I really felt like this draw towards something different. But the career we both were in as an
Yep.
actuaries is seductive in a lot of ways. It pays well.
Yep.
You work hard to get those credentials. So the idea of
Exactly.
changing is not easy. And I think I shared with you earlier that one of the things that really kind of tipped the scales for me was doing this rocking chair exercise, where I projected myself at the end of my life kind of on the porch in a rocking chair, 80 years old,
Yep.
reflecting back. And I asked myself the question: if I lived my whole life, my whole career as an actuary, how would I feel about it?
Hmm.
And I felt this deep sense of regret, like I would be missing out on something important for me.
Yeah.
And not that, again, not that there's anything wrong with being an actuary, great career. But for me, it was the thing that I would have regretted never trying
Right.
this this move I eventually did, which I did 17 years ago.
That's awesome.
So
That's exciting that it has worked out up to this point. And how would you consider, like, in terms of the difference from a traditional actuarial role or consulting type role compared to what you do now? Obviously, probably vastly different, but how would you kind of compare and contrast those?
yeah, obviously you don't have any of the technical pieces, but
Hmm.
I think what I'm doing in terms of the people side is I'm get to work with people at a much more fundamental level. I get to learn what makes them tick, how they can get the most out of themselves to achieve their professional and personal goals, goals that they thought may be beyond their reach. And that's what's thrilling about this is really kind of seeing the transformation.
Yeah.
Uh, and again, what I tell people when they ask what I do as a coach is I say, well, I help people identify and overcome the obstacles that are in their way to get the results they want. So that would be the short version of what I do. So a lot of it is really understanding what's holding you back, and it can be internal things, it can
Yeah.
be external things. There's kind of five areas I work with people in when I think about achieving goals. So one is getting clear on the goal, like
Yep.
really need to get as clear as we can about what we're going after.
Hmm.
Two is to strategize your actions to get there the fastest and easiest way. The third area is to upgrade your skills so that you can execute that strategy effectively. The fourth area would be to optimize your environment so that it supports
Mm-hmm.
you. And the last one, which I think is the most important, is to master your psychology,
Yeah.
get the most out of yourself every day. And when you think about achieving any kind of goal, if you're clear on what you're going after, if you've got a game plan to get there, you've got the skills to execute that game plan effectively, you've got an environment that supports you in a winning mindset, you really maximize the chances of getting there.
Definitely. That's awesome. I'm gonna have to go back and watch these five pointers again. That's good. Do you feel
Sure.
like what do you feel like is one of the biggest obstacles you see that at least people in their heads have when they come to you?
Um, Limiting beliefs.
Yeah.
I think we all have this inner critic, especially when we're trying to do something that's hard and that is risky. There's all kinds of things that show up, and we have these conversations with ourselves in our head. And if you slow those conversations down and put it on paper, it's
Yeah.
interesting what you see in terms of all the things you're telling yourself that you would never tell your best friend. If your best friend was trying to do something hard, you would never say those things to them, but
Yes,
you say it
yes.
to yourself. So I find, like, when we dig into that and expose that can be 80% of the battle right there.
Totally. So like when you transitioned from your actuarial role into working on this, we discussed it a little bit before the interview, but how was that transition on yourself and like your own personal mindset? Was it scary? Uh, like, what were kind of some of the obstacles that you came across when you transitioned?
Yeah, it was scary. And I think uh, starting your own business, making a move like that, having to sell yourself that way is one of the best personal development programs you can go through
Yeah.
because it brings forth every insecurity, every fear that's
Yes.
in there, and you have to kind of face it head on, and it's a huge growing experience. So, yeah, I mean, it was tough, and I had to. I had a combination of just being totally excited with the vision and everything else about what I wanted to create,
Yep.
but also, this whole thing of loss, because
Yes.
I had spent 16 years in this career building it, and you know how hard it is to pass those
Oh yeah.
exams. It's like, what am I doing?
And you
It's
got you
like,
got an FSA, is that correct?
correct, yeah.
Yeah.
And so, you're kind of thinking, all right, um, so what I did, this was, one of the things was getting your spouse on board and getting my wife on board.
Right.
She was behind it, and we just made kind of an agreement. We'd spend a year, we'd invest a year and see how it goes. So that helped too.
That's interesting to hear that because I talked to James Washer, who owns the Infinite Actuary. He told me the
Mhm.
exact same thing you just said right now. It was he talked to his wife and they agreed on a year, and he of
Yeah,
course was very successful with it. But
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So you give some time, depending on your situation. You have to find some way to eat during that year.
yes,
So you either have to have the savings or another source of
yep,
income or something. So while you're building,
yep,
so I had to learn. First of all, I had to say, why would anyone hire me? As a coach,
hmm,
all my credentials were of nature of an actuary. So, there was a lot of stuff in my head I had to work through and
hmm,
get beyond, and then I had to go about uh, the whole uh, activity of business development
yes,
and getting the clients. So coming up with your brand, there's all kinds of activities that go into that, and it's doable.
yeah,
It's definitely doable. I coach people all the time on how to do that, um, but it's not for the faint of heart.
yeah,
it
definitely,
definitely takes courage, and I think people have it in them.
yeah,
And one of my passions is I hate to see people feel trapped in their career.
right,
It's like I'm doing, but I have no passion for what I'm doing. I'd rather be doing something else. And it's like, well, you can. It's maybe not easy, but if you're miserable in your own career, something that you're doing 8, 10 hours a day,
right.
how great could it be if you could do something you love instead?
Totally. Yeah, because when you
So,
start adding those hours up, it's like, you're working at
mhm.
least 40 hours, if not 50 or 60, and then,
Right,
you
right.
you got to sleep. So that's however many hours. And it's like, if you're not at least somewhat enjoying what you're doing.
Yeah, it's a huge proportion of our lives,
Yeah.
So yeah, so all those things kind of factored into the transition.
Wow, that's interesting. Do you have for other actuaries that maybe have this entrepreneurial mindset and they want to venture out and do something on their own? Do you have advice for those actuaries since you've kind of gone through that? I mean, especially, I mean, I feel you there with getting the credentials. I mean, you pour yourself into that,
Oh yeah,
and you get to this point where you're like, you get that good salary, you have this good career, and then you want to do the next thing, and it's really hard to say like, wow, I put all this work in, but like, what are your thoughts on that?
yeah. Well, I agree with everything you said. That again, that was kind of the lost part of it that you had to it makes it feel more of a risk, right?
Hmm.
Because you're leaving something behind. Uh, I'd say for advice, if you're going to go out and start something, is number one, um, you want to be able to develop business.
Yeah.
So you might be the best, at whatever service you're offering at, whether it's actuarial services or something else. But if no one knows about it, you're the best kept secret, then you're going to be struggling.
Yes.
So the ability to attract and convert prospects into clients is a really important aspect of the whole game. And there's lots of people that they say, man, I'm really good at this. They have to find a way to get people engaged in that idea.
Right.
So whether you do it yourself or you have a partner or a strategic partner that can do that part for you, that has to be covered. So that's
Definitely.
one piece of advice I give. The other one is just to beware, because I see this a lot. You want to avoid what I call lack of revenue diversification. So I see a lot of people, they start out, and a lot of times they'll use it as a launching pad. Maybe they've been laid off from their job, but the
Mm-hmm.
company still wants them to consult with them, or they'll land like one company that's really huge.
Yeah.
They have this great sweetheart engagement, but they only have one client.
And then if they lose that client,
Yeah, it's like
yeah,
devastating,
yeah,
right? So it's like you're unemployed. So, because I've always, a friend told me one time, he says, when you're employed by a company, you basically have one client.
yeah.
So when you're a consultant with one client, it's not much different than being employed.
Good
I
point.
mean, you have the same risks and everything else. So I coach people to really strive to get to the place where they don't have any client that contributes more than 20% of their revenue.
Yeah.
That way, if you lose a client, it's not devastating.
Yes.
So that's something to try to avoid, and don't get the false sense of security that, okay, now I've made it, I have my own business.
Right.
When you have one huge client.
Yeah.
So
And then it can all go away in one day.
oh yeah, and you
Yeah.
see it happen. That 3-year assignment can turn into 6 months
Yeah.
overnight.
Yeah.
It happens all the time.
I'll,
So
I'll believe it. That's good advice. So, kind of transitioning over to, you wrote a book called The Influential Actuary. Can you give us an idea of what inspired you to write this book, and was it kind of digging back into your actuarial roots to write this? Because you wrote it fairly recently, is that correct, or was it a while ago?
it's actually been 9 years
It's been
now.
9 years. Okay.
So
So your
yeah,
actuarial career was even more fresh when you wrote it. But what what
yeah,
what kind
yeah.
of started that?
Well, actually, Gail Hall, who was the president of Actex, approached me about writing the book.
Okay.
We didn't have an exact topic then, so then I had to think about, okay, what's the message I wanted to share with actuaries, and really what I had found from coaching a lot of actuaries, from my own experience and everything else, is that um, we're the exam syllabus is so focused on the technical,
Yes.
and I'm not as close to it as I used to be, but I would dare to say it still probably is,
It
even
it
though they try to
yes
make
it
some
is.
changes. So, which is great and it's necessary, but what helps the actuary? What equips the actuary with the people side of what they do?
Mhm.
And one of the things that has come up, some of the themes that has come up, is the actuary's lack of ability to communicate effectively
Mhm.
and to influence. In fact, in the book, I interviewed what I three people I had worked with pretty closely, either in my comings and goings as an actuary or even as a coach. But these were three influential actuaries, and there was a fourth one that I interviewed that I didn't have a personal relationship with, but I had heard about his name come up enough times that I included him as well. And I said, I asked them all, what would set you apart as an actuary? What do you think has set you apart? And they all said the same thing. They all said the ability to communicate effectively to all kinds of
Yeah.
audiences and the ability to influence. So they said, hands down, that's what sets you apart.
Yep.
The technical is kind of a given. You need that.
Yeah.
It's kind of entrance to the game. But beyond that, ability to communicate, ability to influence. So that's what the book is about.
Wow, and I've actually heard this exact same thing from a lot of actuaries that say that, and it's kind of that idea of, you can do an analysis till you're blue in the face, but if no one really knows about it or what it means, um, it's not really going to matter. Kind of like you pointed out with the business side. Like if you have a business and no one knows about it, it's the same sort of thing. It's like you can have the greatest thing in the world, but that communication piece seems to be so key.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely. And you hear a lot of complaints from like senior management saying, yeah, I don't understand what the actuary is saying,
yeah,
or we get mounds of data, but it's not really information I can
yeah,
use, things like that. And, and I know I'm generalizing here, but
right,
I've heard it enough times that, there is some truth in the generalization, right?
totally.
So, um, yeah, and so in the book, there's kind of three sections in the book. One is the first section is knowing what makes people tick. So it's all about understanding the psychology of human behavior and what causes people to resist change or actually make changes, um, how people are wired, those kind of things. The second section is knowing how to sell your ideas.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all about tools and skills of influence. And then the last section really kind of ties things together. I call it getting out there and playing the game.
Okay.
So it's really the strategy, the application, the psychology of taking action around those things.
See, you were like the perfect person to write this book because you had that actuarial background, and kind of these principles are the principles that you would almost use for building a business as well. But like that's how you have that influence within an organization. I feel like the same skills that you might use to build and lead a business.
Yeah, no,
So,
it is. It's a way of thinking about it. In fact, a way actuaries can make impact on their businesses or their organizations, I think, is to think of themselves as a business or as a
yeah,
consulting
yeah,
practice,
definitely.
to have kind of an entrepreneurial mindset. So, when you think about that, now you're looking at, okay, I've got, an array of services I offer or products, if you will. I also need the marketing side,
Right.
like you said. So I'm not the best kept secret.
Yeah.
So I have a vehicle to promote my ideas. Everyone around me is my client,
Yep.
right? And so when you think that way, then you're always thinking, okay, how can I add more value? It's not just about doing your routine job now, and it's not about doing a task because someone asked you to do it. It's
Yes.
about being a partner. And so it's not enough to just generate the results and report the numbers. You've got to report in a way that it's useful to them and make a recommendation.
Yeah.
You know, don't just say, "Hey, here's the information. You guys now decide." Be a partner in it.
Yeah.
That's what consultants do, right? So
Totally.
I think that having that kind of mindset in the way you approach your job can change the way you look and the way you act,
Yeah. No,
perform your
that's
duties.
true. And this may be the answer to my next question, which was I was going to ask you, how do you feel an actuary can have maximal impact within their organization? And may be very related to everything you just said.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. That's what I would say. Is think about your job as a business, and you're the
Mm-hmm.
business owner or you're the consultant, and it gets you thinking beyond just your job description too. If you're
Right.
looking at the organization, saying, "I got this client. How can I make impact?
Yeah.
If I see something that's not working, how can I change it? Or what influence can I have? Who do I need to talk to? Who do I need to get to know? You know,
Definitely.
the whole idea of networking, which a business owner has to do.
Mm-hmm.
You think about doing one, it gets you out of your office. It gets you,
Yes.
all those kind of things. Having that mindset will transform the way you do work.
Yeah. That's amazing. So with writing this book, um, I'm also curious, just like the dynamics of writing a book. Was that the first time you had written one, or
Yes.
and did you have any idea of how to kind of go about that?
I mean, I have my own ideas,
Yeah.
but it's like, have you ever done something and you do it once and then you say, well, if I did it again, I would do it a lot better.
Yes, yes.
It kind of fell in that category,
Okay.
So, because it was my first rodeo with that, but started with an outline. We got agreement with Actex on the outline, and then you start filling in the outline.
Hmm.
Um, and it took me 3 years before it was completed. It was a 3 year project,
Yeah, I'm not
but I did.
surprised. I was curious like about that process because I mean, in my head, writing a book seems like a big thing.
Yeah, and again, this is one of the things I would probably do differently with, if I write another book, which I've thought about many times. And it was interesting because I felt bad about it because part of the reason it took a long time is because you get busy, you put it down for a
Yes.
while. I
Yeah.
mean, there were times I put it down for 6 months.
Right.
So, and I talked to Gail about it. She says that's pretty typical. 3 years is kind of typical.
Okay.
So, but I could have written it in a year.
Yeah. If
Um,
like you were just
I,
focused on it.
well, that and I think it's about having a deadline. I think that's part of it. Like
Hmm.
really having a deadline you want to meet. Um, Now, having said that, I think there is some advantages to stretching out a little bit, the writing process, because I did write other chapters I didn't think about at the beginning.
Right.
You're processing, you're digesting things. So writing it in 30 days, you're going to get a different result than if you do it over 6 months.
Totally. No, that
So,
makes sense.
but yeah, and it was great working with Actex. With they helped with editing and graphics and all that stuff. So I didn't have to think about that as much.
Right.
Which is nice.
That's awesome.
But
So I'm curious on your thoughts. I know I'm kind of jumping around here with questions, but we only have a few more minutes. So just thinking about kind of the future for actuaries, the next 20 to 40 years. Obviously, technology is constantly changing, and actuaries are very involved with technology just because of the fact that we tend to use a lot of data. So, do you have
yeah.
any thoughts on how the profession, like in your opinion, I mean, obviously none of us really know, but in your opinion, how it might change for people, and especially those that are kind of looking to get into the field? Uh, what do you think might change in the next 20 to 40 years?
Oh gosh, yeah, no doubt it's going to change.
Uh huh.
What comes to mind is what I've seen recently on data analytics. There's been so much more broader use. I mean, we
Mm-hmm.
see it in sports, right? We see it in all industries now, because the technology has made data so accessible.
Yes.
Collecting and analyzing the data, there's a lot of automation. Now you've got AI involved. So, but actuaries have been kind of doing this data analytics thing
For a
for
while.
a long time, right?
Yep.
So, so like I just did a change management project with a company they were implementing a new data analytics program, and all the actuarial bones in me felt right at home.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, this isn't new for me.
Yep.
It's like, and so I think I think it's going to provide a lot of opportunity for actuaries in the future
Hmm.
to work in different industries. Because they have the goods on that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's interesting because like there's so much talk about big data, and now like that
right,
I'm doing grad school and I'm working with statistics people. People are talking about all this new cool stuff, and I'm in my head I'm thinking it is cool, but I'm like a lot of people don't know that actuaries already have a lot of this skill set. There may be a few nuances that actuaries could learn in a different industry or different types
right,
of analytics, but it's like you're saying, actuaries have been doing this for quite a while.
yeah, no, I agree. So I mean, if I was going into that now, that's kind of where I would be focusing.
Yeah. So, what would you say for people going into the field, the number one skill that you would recommend for an actuary today?
Yeah, and my mind always goes for people in general, not just actuaries, because that's kind of where I live.
Yeah.
Obviously, actuaries need to learn the technical side, um, but beyond that, there's a concept I teach my clients called tension management, you can think of tension as the level of urgency someone feels to take action.
Mm-hmm.
So if tension's too high, that can be problematic. If tension's too low, that can also be problematic. So I work with clients really to understand that concept in a lot of detail. We have like a whole approach methodology to that. And to the extent you can monitor and manage your own tension and the tension of people around you, that will have one of the greatest impacts on your success.
Hmm.
So when I learned this stuff, it was like a game changer for me. And I talk about it. I have a chapter in my book that covers some of it. But I would, I would highly recommend everyone learn about that. And we know
Interesting.
it under different names. We know we kind of do it unconsciously, but when you can do it consciously,
Yeah.
it can be really effective.
I like
So,
it. Yeah, and I like that you chose for the number one skill something not technical too, because I do think that the technical is a given, kind of like you stated earlier in the interview, to kind of get
right,
into the profession, but really to be effective and even outside of actuarial, it's
right.
probably more psychological.
Yeah, yeah, and it's about being effective with others.
Yeah.
Even with all the way we're going with social media and things like that,
Hmm.
it still boils down to people relating to one another
Yes,
and how that's where the power is in an organization is how people work together.
for sure.
So
Awesome. All right, I got two fun questions for you at the end here.
okay.
Do you listen to podcasts or read any books? And if so, what would you say is kind of your favorite? Like, what do you like? What do you like listening to? What do you like reading?
Yeah, I've gotten into podcasts a little more in the last couple years, but I certainly have read all my life lots of different books. I gotta say, my favorite book's the Bible.
Number
Uh,
one. All right, I like it.
beyond that, it would probably be Wild at Heart by John Eldridge.
Okay.
Great book. There's a quote in that book that I really love, and it ties in with what we've been talking about. It's not actually his quote, he's quoting someone else named Howard Thurman. It's don't ask yourself what the world needs, ask yourself what makes you come alive, and then go do that. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive.
I like it. That is a very good quote.
Yeah. In terms of business books, one of my favorite, I would say, is The Five Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni.
Okay.
So I use that in my work. It's a great book when I work with groups and group dynamics.
I don't think I've ever heard of that book. I have
Great
to
book.
write that
They
one down.
actually, and he actually, it's written like a fable, so
Yeah.
it's written like a story. So it's a pretty quick read, and it's interesting. They came up with another version that's a comic book version.
Oh,
So,
really?
but it has like 90% of the content. Like it stays true to it. So it's kind of a fun way to read it as well. So
And what is your favorite hobby outside of, obviously, you're passionate about what you do for work, but outside of all of that?
I'll give you two. It's playing tennis. I play tennis competitively year round.
Nice.
Love that.
And you were just telling me about a tournament that you went to.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I have made a nationals tournament one time. I've come close a couple other times, but it was a mixed doubles team and actually played in your neck of the woods in Tucson. And we were just happy to go.
It's awesome.
And we said, yeah, we probably won't win anything.
Yeah,
We ended up making it to the finals and we came this close to winning the whole thing. So we came in second in the country. We
that
were
is
pretty
really
happy.
cool.
So that was cool. The other hobby is I love playing the drums. So I'm a
Really?
drummer. So
That's
yeah,
awesome. How long have you been doing that?
since I was 9 years old. So
Wow, very cool.
yeah, so that's fun.
I I'm not very musical myself, but I love music. I took piano lessons when I was a kid, and I kind of gave
Uh-huh.
up on that. I wish that I
Yeah,
had continued, but I've picked up a guitar. I picked up a guitar at a garage sale a while back, and I've tried to learn some stuff on YouTube. But it's
nice.
fun to like have an instrument to play. I wish I was better at it, but
Well, keep at it.
yeah,
Yeah, there's a lot out there now to, like you say, on YouTube. You
yeah.
can you can learn. So that's great.
And
I love it.
we're on YouTube right now.
Right. Here we go.
Yeah. Hey,
So
Dave, I really appreciate you coming on. This was very valuable, and thank you, everyone who is watching. If you liked it, let us know. And if you have any questions, you can type them below, and Dave will answer or myself will answer. So thanks again for joining.
thanks for having me, Paul.
For
Appreciate
sure.
it.
Have a good day, everyone. We will see you next time.